Central Illinois, located just 30 minutes north of Champaign, but I cover counties from essentially Kankakee down to Tuscola. So we're going to dive in here on our CRP Grassland Management, and this is tools for wildlife and conservation success. I'm going to touch up a little bit on our agenda here, what we have. So we're going to be going into plant community secession and why management is important. We're also going to dive into management tools and activities. CRP contract management is actually what we're going to start off with, and then why, when, and how to properly conduct management. So diving in, so CRP contract management. So FSA and NRCS have management guidelines that they establish for all CRP contracts. And that's probably why a lot of you guys are in here and want to know a little bit more about it. And it's called mid-contract management, and it is required within CRP and other programs that you have to maintain your CRP. And they always have a required mid-contract management, and then encourage everyday management as well. So we're also going to dive into, there are some dates that need to be mentioned, such as primary nesting season here in the state of Illinois, and then cost share opportunities, and then maintenance practices. So CRP practices offered under the current sign-up require a management activity to complete it on every acre at least once during the life of the contract. These management activities are designed to maximize wildlife benefits while ensuring soil, water, and other resources are protected. So diving in here, we have, as mentioned earlier, the minimum required. So all of your acreages will receive management 100% of the acres within years 3 to 6. That is what is the mid-contract management, or MCM is the abbreviation. So that is within your contract. You should be able to find it within there. But we do have some optional management as well. And so this be things that there's ever an issue that comes up for here. It's any amount of acres in years 6 through 7, where it's small bits of work. So if there's any woody encroachment or stuff like that, do think about getting in there and maintain, because small bits now make sure that there's not a large, bigger, expensive management when it comes to required. And then as well, there's another optional for years 1 through 3. This is for any re-enrollment acres. So a lot of offices, they have management at the start of a re-enrolled contract. And that's similar because you're coming up on your 5-year mark. So you need to spruce it up a little bit, bring in some disturbance. And the other option here, it's also for failed establishment. So there are some management avenues in there that you can go through if the seeding had failed for some reason. And the options for grassland habitat that we're going to be talking about today are disking, burning, spraying, and interseeding. And as well, the dates, be sure to know that all management has to be done between August 1st and through April 15th, because from the 15th of April till August 1st is considered primary nesting season. So if you are interested in doing management, definitely consider doing it any time after August 1st and before April 15th. So about a month yet here until that first April 15th deadline. So that's why we decided to push this through and talk about it. Then as well, mid-contract management is cost shared from the FSA. That is still available, especially on your older contracts. They're changing the rules a little bit on there. So if you are having a new contract, be sure to check with your FSA office or local biologist, and we can talk about the cost share opportunities there. So a little bit about where to find. So we get asked this question a lot, people not knowing what their management is, what they initially signed up for. The way the contracts run is that management gets picked at the beginning of the contract. It is a flexible to change, so you can change from disking to burning or to chemical application or to interseeding. So those are all still options and definitely should be considered when you come to management, because it's really hard to predict whenever management comes or what management is actually needed before seed's on the ground. But it's easy to find in any of your paperwork. You'll see something similar to this. It's called the Conservation Plan of Operations, or CPO, as well as within your conservation plan, it'll have the year that it needs to be done, what management you are doing, and then as well, the CPO also has the cost share rate. So a lot of information can be found within this document. So if you don't have a copy for your CRP, be sure to look for it. And strongly want to stress this: primary nesting season here in Illinois is from April 15th until August 1st. Then I put it in there a little bit to avoid a lot of management. If your predominant goals for pollinators, in particular the monarch butterfly, probably be considering a little more of that October 1st date, just so they have some good nectar sources as they migrate down. But for birds, it's April 15th through August 1st to keep disturbances at a minimum. All right, so kind of some examples of what that would be, because you can't go over all the acreage all at once. It's not beneficial for wildlife by any means. You always want to have some cover on the ground. So that'd be things as this scenario here of disking. If you're less than 5 acres or less, you work on halves. If you're more than 5 acres for your CRP, you work on thirds. So if you are 5 acres or less, you could disc half in the fall, 15 or 20, and then do half later. And then if you're larger than that, you work on burns or on thirds. So you could do a burn 1/3 of the acreage per year going through that. So it would be years 3 through 6 of your contract. And so what that management is actually accomplishing, what we're doing is looking at resetting the secession clock. So long after disturbance communities transform to a different state. So they'd be, if you're a grassland, most likely you're going to be turn into shrubby and woody vegetation. And that goes against what the CRP contract actually says. And then as we look right here, you can see a lot of our upland species are actually preferred within that grassland to grass shrub area. So if you're a typical hunter in this area, that's where you want to keep. You're not wanting to get too dense into the oak hickory forest, and you're not wanting to stay at the bare ground. So conducting this management on timely intervals will keep you within that grassland to grass shrub. Then as well, throwing this in here, I get a lot of questions of like, when's the best time to when to conduct management. This particular scenario is built for burns, but I've noticed it can still hold true just for the other managements as well. So whenever you're going out there and what you're performing is actually what you're going to be stimulating. So a lot of your March, April burns are stimulating your grasses. And so we get a lot of people that say like, oh, our wildflowers are now diminishing and our grasses are taking over. Well, if that's the case, maybe try some August burns so that you stimulate flowers. I always like to say fall flowers, spring grass. And myself, this here's a little tidbit of mine. My other colleagues probably think I'm a little old school and slightly crazy, but with the Farmer's Almanac, they do have planting guides, and what they notice especially, so this is March right here, so I pulled out this month. If anyone's looking to plan a good time for management now, you're looking from the 23rd to the 27th. So that is the most barren period. It's best for killing plant pests. So if you're having some cool season grass issues and you're looking to do some management, probably consider that 23rd to 27th. It's been working for me, but then again, this is yeah, you got to believe it to actually have it work. So just a little example. So this here is a grassland management and show what we're doing. So this is overrun by grasses. You see really little forb growth in there. And after you conduct a management, you can turn it into something more like this, where you get a lot more forb growth, a lot more bare soil, and that's very beneficial for a lot of wildlife and insects. So now we're going to be diving into management activities and tools. So the management activities that CRP has available for grassland practices are prescribed burning, and we will dive into this in greater detail just because that is one that is a lot more confusing to landowners. So we'll dive into that one a little more than the other ones, but definitely if you have any questions, feel free to jump out and ask in the chat box there, and the other biologists can help out. So and then there's disking, which is a very light rate disking herbicide application. And then the grazing, mowing, and haying, those are a little more non-CRP driven. I've heard of some cases they can be done on CRP, but it is more of a out west that I've always heard those. So don't anticipate too much of grazing and haying in the forms of management here in Illinois. So diving into disking, the whole purpose is to set back and those sod-bound grasses, and you're wanting to just lightly scratch the surface to bring up some forb growth. So let's dive into this a little more. So the point is to reduce residue. You're bringing up some wildflowers, and you're going to bring up some seed while you're at it. You're going to increase the wildflowers, increase the bare ground. I've noticed disking tends to always bring up some of your more annual weed pressure as well. So if you do disking, do consider that when you're bringing seeds out of the seed bank. That is always an option. And I always like to go no deeper than 4 inches, so 4 inches deep or less, to create that 50 to 75% bare soil where you're at. I've seen some instances where it's worked more like a typical field, and they really go deep with it, and you destroy too much structure on top and bury a lot of those small forb seeds deeper than what they should be, and they'll have a hard time germinating out of it. And then you're looking at that third of an acreage a year. So you're going to want to do that in either strips or blocks to divide that up into a third. And then disking in the fall or early winter is best because, again, we're going after the grasses and woody species. So if you're coming through with a disc, that is the best time to kind of set them back and open up some of that bare soil for forbs to come through, get some sunlight, and start their germination cycle. And then I do always want to stress this, be considerate of any invasive species in your area, or if you don't know what some of these invasive species are, feel free to give us a call. We can definitely help you. But yeah, you do not want to disc on top of the thistles or reed canary grass. Those are rhizome spread species. And whenever you run a disc, you will cut those rhizomes and you turn one plant into 50. So that is one of those reasons that you need to have one of us or someone from the office come out and identify some of these plants and determine what management would be best. And I always like doing some interseeding. If you want to look for greater diversity of your wildflowers or greater diversity of just plants, try doing an interseeding on top of the disc area. So you're already exposing soil, might as well throw some seeds on it and greatly increase that diversity. So here's just kind of some pictures of what it looks like. So this would be November 14th. Of what those strips are. So it's called strip disking, and that is because you are working it within strips or blocks. You are not disking the entirety, and you can see really in there, you're not turning up a bunch of black soil like you would a typical ag field. This is just a light, what I call a chicken scratch, to break up some sod forming grasses and increase the soil and seed soil contact of your forbs. And that's that same site. Then again, taken on August 15th, you can see the circles around the same tree. So you about the general location, and you can see those strips. You can see the yellow flowers popping in between the grasses. So it does go in there, and you get more forb growth out of disking. Now we're looking at chemical control, and chemical control actually has you're targeting the same species that predominate the secession. So that'd be your grasses and woody species, and so we're going to dive in a little bit about those. And this is just a way to go through if you don't have a disc, or you don't like the idea of disking, or you have a severe infestation of grasses or woody species. Chemical will be a good option for you. So these here are some chemicals that will target more of your broadleaves and woody species. So again, you're always going to want to apply in blocks, so a third or half of the area at a time. Another option is to paint stumps. So painting stumps is a mechanical cut, and then you put the chemical on that stump to prevent any regrowth. Or one that I really like is a basal bark application. That's where you do 2 foot from the base of the stem, 2 foot up and all the way around. That does a pretty good job, especially with your picloram products. So that'd be your Tordon and Garlon. So those would be really good ones to use for basal bark applications. Yeah, so these are just a list of some chemicals that will target your tree sprouts and other woody invasives, and then their common names around it. So, like I said, the other aspect of what we're trying to set back is set back those grasses. So with this, you can use glyphosate, but definitely consider the timing. If you're trying to target some cool season grasses, you want to spray earlier in the year. So there in the spring, whenever the soil temperatures are 50 to 70, if you're targeting your warm season grasses, you want to go a little more late summer after the 70 degrees and once the warm season grasses start germinating. So, or if you're just targeting, you're not wanting to kill off any of your early spring forbs or summer forbs, definitely look at a grass selective herbicide, and those will definitely target only the grasses. Then again, yes, you want to apply this in strips or blocks. So looking at more of just working a third or a half if you're less than 5 acres. And as well, interseeding always does pretty pretty good. You want to interseed some wildlife-friendly legumes or forbs after herbicide if you were lacking to begin with. Then one thing I always like to mention for glyphosate is what I have here. It has a 2-week long residual for natives, so definitely read labels and see if it has any residual. You're going to want to be past that to put any forbs down, just in case. So you don't want to spend a bunch of money on expensive seed and then have it killed with the chemical that you put on. All right, so now diving into the grazing, mowing, and haying. Again, this would be more of an option if you were working non-CRP ground. So I always like to throw it in there. And out west, they do have some CRP options with this that decreases your rental rate, but there are some benefits that can provide, and so I always like bringing it up because it always seems to spark some ideas of integrating some good management for those non-CRP areas. So this is what you're going for. So with the grazing, a lot of your ruminant livestock around here, it's cattle, so they're going to be targeting grass species. So they can actually set back a lot of your grasses just by having them graze, and then as well they turn those nutrients and keep it back down on the soil and remove some residue while they're at it. It's great for wildlife structure if it's properly managed, because they'll come through and physically remove and trample down, so you'll get a lot of that seed or bare soil and paths that go through your habitat area. And yeah, so livestock will create a lot of bare ground for chicks to easily move, and then they recycle nutrients back to the ground. So it's really good for soil health. With the mowing and haying, I've noticed this is really good if there's an infestation of red clover. So if there's any pasture conversions, you can really look at the mowing and haying options, because you can mow it and hay red clover at the right time, and you can effectively lessen the presence of species like red clover or some fescues. And but mowing on a typical basis, I threw this in here, you have to do it regarding the CRP guidelines. So for wildlife purposes, you don't want to go much less than 10 inches. 10 inches or higher would be preferred, so you're not decapitating a lot of your good native forbs. And then as well, you always need approval from the county committee for these grassland practices. They do have it different on some like waterways and filter strips, which are erosion control practices. But if you're in a grassland practice, do seek approval from the county committee. So just call your local USDA office to be sure on that. And then mowing with disking or spraying or haying is better, just because you're stacking up some managements on there. What I always like of mowing, if you have an infestation of cottonwoods or something along those lines, of doing a mow so you can cut out those growing woody trees, and you come back and paint the stumps. And that's a really effective way to treat some of those grassland areas that are up against a woodlot, and they're being high pressure with woody species. And then the haying has some benefits, because you are removing that litter as well, so you're exposing that bare ground that chicks and other wildlife like. Now we're going to be diving into interseeding. So interseeding definitely enhances wildlife benefits. It adds a lot more plant diversity and structure to our grass stands. So always kind of keep it in your mind there. And I always like using it on top of some other managements. So interseeding is not practice specific. It can go through a lot of your upland or grassland practices, such as CP33, 42. So that'd be your field borders, pollinators, even with the new prairie strips. it is always an option out there. And there's the whole purpose is to bring in some new seeds, some new diversity. Really good if you had a re-enrolled CRP acreages. That's always one of those that I like to recommend some interseeding, just to bring some life back into it and knock out and displace some of those invasives. Now diving into prescribed fire. Prescribed fire is by far my favorite management for grassland because it is a very cost-effective and efficient way to control woody species with cool season encroachment, and improves a lot of our native grasslands here. So we're going to dive pretty heavily into this one, and going to go over some guidelines, because it is it's always best for the landowner to be involved, and so this is going to show some ways for them. So just having some pictures here of it isn't still an excellent and expensive tool. So that was while it was burning, and this would be growing in that again that later that summer. So you can see, even though it's a very intense form of management, that it definitely comes back, and it's going to set back a lot of your aggressive species, such as your grasses and your woodies, open up that bare soil, allow these forbs to flourish and have a beautiful looking prairie. And as well, it also kills trees. So running a prescribed fire through definitely will keep those woody species and any further secession back. So that's what you're trying to do. And since we had this, which is actually prescribed for fire, I thought I'd bring it up again. Is a lot of your burns are done from March to April. So if you're trying to control some cool seasons, that'd be a good time to do it when they're 4 to 6 inches tall. If you have brome grass or fescue, maybe run a fire through there whenever they're 4 to 6 inches tall to set back. And then from August until then, all through your fall and winter months, you're going to be stimulating a lot of your flower growth there. That August, September time, of course, is really good for killing out any tree sprouts, and as well as setting back some warm season grasses. So definitely consider more of those August to September burns. This kind of example, so I get a lot of people always asking me that you can't burn in August because everything's still green. Well, you actually can. It ends up being a little smokier than usual, but the native grasses are starting to die back then. So you can see the corn is still green there, so that prevents any sparks from going into the neighbor, and then you can still get a good burn through it. So another picture here of an August burn with a nice good disc fire break. You can see that they are a lot smokier than your typical spring burns, just because you are burning more, evaporated out a lot more moisture through it. But it really comes through, and you can set back a lot of those aggressive grasses and bring in some more forb growth, as well as remove those tree sprouts. Here's just another picture with a prescribed fire. You can typically get trees up to 7 inches in diameter. So you can see that there are some trees that died from that fire that are considerably large trees that you would not be able to run a mower with. So you can set back a lot of those just with running the fire. I'm going to dive into a little bit of the how. So CRP does have some guidelines of how to do a prescribed burn, and that's going to be with a prescribed burn plan, which our biologists are capable of writing. So Pheasants Forever can definitely help out on that and And right in these burn plans, they will have maps and instructions and the how-tos. They equate to about 10 pages worth of documentation explaining proper wind speeds, directions, and all that. And then another thing is the burn permit. So the EPA requires a burn permit for CRP to be burning, and this is predominantly for them to just gauge how much CO2 is going in the atmosphere at a time. I've never had the EPA come out to a burn, thankfully. So it's more so they can monitor what is being emitted, and as well as us biologists, we do have fillable copies of these for any of you producers. So some big considerations, definitely consider the weather. You're going to want a sunny day, winds from 5 to 15. And I have on here avoid east winds, and that is because east winds are very unpredictable. They will switch from northeast to southeast to directly east quite rapidly. So in our area, they're a little more unstable wind pattern. So unless it is a listed in the burn plan, say like there's an interstate on one site, you don't want to be blowing smoke on it, that would be a reason to use an east wind. But if you can avoid it, definitely avoid an east wind. And then with humidity, you're going to be looking from 40 to 60%. If it's too humid, of course, there's going to be too much moisture. You're not going to be able to run the burn through it effectively. And then consider the location. So definitely the burn unit, adjacent fuels, neighbors, roads, hazards. It's always best to call up the neighbors and the local fire department, and let them know that a prescribed burn is going to be running through. Just here's kind of a picture. This is going to give just an example of kind of what the map is going to be looking like from a burn plan. You'll have a listed burn area as well as options for fire breaks, listing out some neighboring conditions that you need to consider, and then any roads and stuff. So going to do a quick little thing about fire breaks, because fire breaks are by far landowner's best friend. That will turn a fire, put it out right away if you have a good fire break. So they're by far the best friends, because a boring burn is a good burn. I always like disc fire breaks because soil doesn't burn. So if you bring up some soil, you remove that residue, that flame will then come through and hit a stop. And just here's an example of it. You can see that the fire here is burning within the prairie, but it is stopping once it hits that bare soil. And then some advantages, you can do a dist and mode. Some advantages of this, if you're worried about your smoke, by having that shorter vegetation right up against that fire break, it allows you to more easily control that fire. As well, you're going to have a little less smoke and less flame coming off. So this particular example, you can see they're close to a tree line, so they didn't want any sparks bouncing up into the trees and over the fire break. So they went ahead and mowed it right up against the disc, and that's going to keep a lot more of that flame shorter to the ground, a little more easily controllable. There's definitely some side-by-sides here, so you can see both the road, the ditch, the disc fire break, and then the burn. So you can layer a lot of these up to increase the effectiveness of your burn. Green fire break, they are recommended. This particular one is a nearby wheat field, so having that green growth, of course, it's going to have a lot more moisture in it, so it's not going to carry a fire near as good. And you can see a fire creep through it, and it will stop right there at the green fire break. And then roads are always good as well if they are rarely traveled. And if you're using road as a fire break, please do put up signs. You do want to notify any oncoming traffic of a potential fire. The mowed and wet lines, they are extremely effective. They're really good if trying to burn within your CRP units. However, they're not as optimal because you're really having to babysit them, because you're going to have, if you have a high crew number, then they would be effective. But if you are operating on a low crew number, you're going to want to consider one of those other options. So diving into some ignition sequences here. I always like backing fires. They are by far the safest. They reduce the smoke, and they kill trees better because you're going to have some heat on the source a little bit longer. A ring fire is a safe one. It speeds up the process a little bit, and essentially what you're doing is you're just burning everything into the center. So you'll circle the field, and that leaves your burn line, your fire break increasing as it moves in. And then head fires are not recommended unless you have really good lasting fire breaks. Head fires get really intense really fast. So going into some examples of the backing fire, you can see what that is the wind would be blowing in this scenario from right to left into the fire break, that disc fire break. And you can just see how that fire is going to be slowly moving across. It's not going to be rushing, and it's going to definitely decrease the smoke, make it a little easier to manage, and just be better controllable. So here's another example. If you're close to any houses or anything like that, highly recommend a backing fire because it just slowly creeps into the wind and puts out the residue that way. So you can see that's how they end up. Very controllable. It did not creep out of the green fire breaks at all. Very, very low intensity. So here's a ring fire. You can see behind the man there, you're going to have completely encircled the fire so that you will have it building into itself, and that black line, that black area is constantly getting better. So whenever you run that head fire through there, that it definitely will not get away from you. Here's just another example of that same fire. You can see it is burning all the way around and moving into itself. Then again, I have head fires are not recommended because you can see just from this picture of how intense that flame can be. So if you're going to be running a head fire, be sure to run the rings around so that you are having this fire be a lot more controlled by removing its fuel loads by safer fires. And then I have a slide here. Definitely consider mix and matching these techniques. With CRP, you can only get cost share on one. However, you can definitely take care of a lot of your issues in any grassland management by mixing and matching them. So I have two examples here. You can have cost share on the spraying, and you conduct a prescribed burn. And what that's going to do is remove a lot of your residue, kill off some of your small woody species, and expose them, so that once spring hits and things start greening up, now your woody species are easier to control, and you can come through on a four-wheeler, side-by-side, or even a backpack sprayer and do the treatment on those woody species. So you can target them better just because they're more visible. And then as well, you can use a burn or a disking to expose some soil and then interseed. So you can have interseeding as you were listed mid-contract management, but do the burn and the disking as some site preparation to expose that bare soil so you get better seed soil contact. You're going to have a lot more seeds germinate. You're going to end up with a lot more diversity of your mix, which is just going to make it a better prairie and a lot higher wildlife value. So in conclusion, we talked about knowing how and when management needs to be done. Please contact your local USDA office or biologist if you have any questions about what your management is or best ways to go about it. Management really isn't as hard as many think. The hardest things that I see come across is just lack of access to equipment. So be sure to reach out to us. We're going to help you line up some better access, either with a chapter, or the offices do have lists of contractors as well. So yeah, feel free to reach and ask questions, and it's not as hard as you think, and we can definitely make it easier. With us biologists, yeah, being able to write burn plans and walk you through that process makes it a lot easier for any landowner. So then again, just reach out to us, and we're here to help. And always want to put on here, consider more late summer management. A lot of the invasives, or I guess not invasives, aggressive species that we see are your grasses and woodies. So if you want to keep that good solid grassland and diverse prairie, consider more some late summer management so we can set those back and yeah, definitely set back those woodies. And then definitely consider some different stages. That's tagging back in with a late summer management. And as well, if you're burning a third and third and a third, try doing it a little more randomly. Maybe do a summer burn one spot, a spring burn here, a fall burn there, and definitely see what works best for your operation, and as well as achieves the desires that you're wanting to achieve. With that, I do have my contact information here. I saw there's quite a bit of chat questions going through, so hopefully the other biologists are able to help out, and they are spread across the state. If you, I cover East Central Illinois. If you're in another part of the state, please get onto our website at pheasantsforever.com and then click on the Find a Biologist tab, and that will lead you to your closest biologist.
All right.
With that, I'm going to pass her back to Katie here.
So thank you so much for that. We did have a couple chats come in, and we did just have a question come in on our question and answer. I live in Northwest Illinois. I frost seeded switchgrass this past weekend, and then it snowed 3 inches yesterday. Is it too early to do a frost seeding? Do I need to do it again later this month to get a good planting? So yeah, if you kind of want to talk about that and switchgrass and.
Yeah, with frost seedings, it's definitely a little more weather dependent. I know here in East Central, we just had some ice come through just yesterday. So air seedings and frost seedings are still doable. Whenever you reach mid-April, you're probably going to want a little more seed soil contact or a little more site preparation, because now other species are starting to germinate already. So that's going to be filling those niches prior for that native seed. And then I've noticed it tends to be around June 15th. What I've seen anything done after June 15th seems to be lagging a little bit. You're probably better off looking of just doing longer site prep and then conducting your air seeding that next fall. And the reason for that is it will have these seeds sprout up, and then we get into the driest months of the year, July and August. And they just seem to be stunted. They're still there, but they're just a little bit stunted, and you tend to have some higher weed pressure. So definitely, if you're wanting to have it look good, right out of the gate, or if you have any neighbors that are wanting you to make it look good, consider doing it a little more, in the winter months. But you still would have some time here if you can knock it in before April 15th.
All right, we got a few more questions coming in. What is the best method to control brome grass or other cool season grasses in warm season grass? What is the best method to control brome grasses and other cool season grasses in warm season grass and forb mix? Is it better to burn in the early March and spray glyphosate on the cool season grasses as they green up first, or should I just wait until late March, early April, burn after cool season grasses green up?
I would probably start looking, if you're fighting just grasses, both warm and cool season grasses, consider that grass selective herbicides. If you spray a grass selective herbicide like Select within that mid March to mid April timeframe, that's going to definitely kill off some of your cool seasons. And then if you pick it up again after August 1st, spraying that grass selective herbicide, you can set back a lot of your warm season grasses. And then consider doing, if you're wanting to supply some forbs after that second burn, second spray, consider a burn, and that'll to remove a lot of that residue that's going to be dried from being dead, and then come in with a burn, remove that residue, get some sunlight back to the soil, get those forbs exposed to that sunlight, and you should start seeing them pop right back up.
All right. Then we had, what do you think of intensity herbicide to stunt cool season grasses?
Yeah, herbicide are really effective at stunting cool season grasses. You really want to hit them early, so before the soil temperatures hit 70 degrees, that's whenever a lot of your natives are going to be coming out. So a lot of people use glyphosate for that purpose, just because it's readily available and affordable. And if you just push it either early in the season or late in the season, whenever the soil temperatures are more like 50 degrees is what you're looking for then. Because if it's green and your cooler temperatures, typically it's not native and should be controlled.
And then, when interseeding forbs and wildflowers, what month is best? What techniques work best to get the seeds to sprout? Can I broadcast seeds in November, December on an area that was burned in August?
Yeah, so if an area was burned in August, I'd be looking at anything after November 15th until that April 15th for air seeding. I love doing it either right before or even better, right after just a small snow. So you get, a quarter-inch of snow. You can see where you've been. Make sure you add a filler in there so you can see that spread out. And yeah, you won't lose your location because your tracks are in the snow. The seed you can see dropping in the snow. And then if you got another snow coming in, works out great because that moisture is going to be available for the seed whenever it's ready to germinate. And a lot of your forbs need stratification. So it actually needs that freeze and thaw to break open the seed coat. And so by doing it within those winter months in what we call winter dormant seedings, you can see some plants germinate a lot quicker than by doing a spring seeding. So some of those, what I call 2-year plants, you'll start seeing pop up that first year if they get that stratification right out of the gate.
And then how do you kill water hemp in warm season grasses?
Time, really. Water hemp is yes, it's really prolific in ag systems, but it is a extremely early successional annual. And I actually had a field just last year. The farmer thought it was going to be a failure. Nothing but water hemp came up right out of the gate. And then this year, you couldn't see a water hemp out there. The native perennials they're investing in their root systems that first year early on. They will choke out water hemp left and right. So I would just give it time. Let the natives do their thing, and they'll win.
All right. Well, I think so far we've got all of the questions that came up in the chat and the question and answers. So thank you everybody once again for joining us. We will be sending out an email tomorrow morning with a recording of this presentation. We do encourage you, if you do have any additional habitat questions, to visit our website. I shared it in the chat, but it is www.ihuntil.com. So iHunt Illinois. If you go to the Team Illinois tab, you will find a list of our biologists. We will be in the next month or two adding several more positions onto that. So if your county is not currently covered by a biologist, we recommend reaching out to your nearest one. And we do hope to host several more of these in the future, covering different aspects of habitat management. But once again, thank you everybody so much for joining us tonight. And thank you for your support of Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever in Illinois. And we look forward to seeing you all in the future.